Good evening, everybody. Thank you for appearing tonight. The EASD Resiliency Coalition would like to thank you all for attending tonight for our In Conversation event talking about healthy relationships. We will be discussing about emotional intelligence, nonverbals, and listening skills, and how these attributes help to have a good, healthy relationship with family members, peer friends, and colleagues. Tonight we have Dan from the City of Elkhorn Police Department. Then we have Carmen from New Beginnings APBFB. We then have Hailey from New Day Women's Clinic, and then Kim from Agape House. And they will talk about their skill set that pertains to healthy relationships. All these folks bring a strong skill set from their careers that have specialized in building healthy relationships. As they share their knowledge with you, please ask questions throughout the evening. This is a safe platform to engage with what we want to make sure that you get all your questions asked. And not only do we want to make sure that you folks ask questions, we also want to make sure that you walk away with resources. So here in our hub in the library where we have people in attendance, they physically have documents about these resources, but you folks will have resources shared in the chat. So just make sure that you download them. Again, if you have any questions, please put it in the chat and we'll make sure that they get answered. We want it to be engaging, and as well, you will see that our panelists will probably ask each other questions. On that note, we will start the event. So Dan, you can start leading us off. Mike?
You are all set.
All right. Hello. Thank you. Dan Croak, City of Elkhorn Police Department. Thanks for having me today. At the police department, we deal with people every single day. Sometimes people are having great days. Sometimes they're not having great days. Sometimes they're not having great days with friends or family that they live with or that they work with. I'd like to focus today a little bit more on the relationships and problems in the relationships that are short of a criminal violation happening. I mean, law enforcement, we have to abide by statutes, have to abide by laws, especially in domestic abuse situations where an arrest is required. I can't deviate from that. So today I'd like to focus on incidents that happen and stay underneath that, stay short of that, something where we can mediate, we can have conversation, we can communicate with the parties involved, and hopefully come to a satisfactory outcome for everybody. So I think that that's what today is about. I can think of one example leading up to this event that I'd like to share. A few years ago, one particular moment, I got called to an apartment for what sounded like an adult and a child yelling and arguing, and doors were being slammed, and it's apartment living, so walls are thin and everybody can hear it. Upon arriving, mom opens the door and says she's arguing with her son, who's in that 12 or 13 age range, about cleaning his room. And son was still in the room, and mom was in the living room just expressing how he doesn't listen. He wants to do what he wants. He comes and goes as he pleases. And it's becoming very frustrating for mom, who has to work into the evening, so the child is on their own to get their homework done. And sometimes that doesn't happen. Mom says, I'm exhausted. I don't know what to do with him. Okay. So certainly this hasn't reached any sort of criminal level. It's mediation, it's communication. It's just having a conversation so that everybody can understand where everybody's coming from. So I go to speak with the son in the bedroom and just ask what he did today. He says, well, I went to school. I came home, tried to do some homework. I didn't understand it all. And I played some video games. And then mom came home from work. I said, okay, well, the neighbors called and said that you were having an argument. Doors were slamming. What was going on? Well, she asked me to clean the room, clean my bedroom. I look around and it's a kid's bedroom. It's a teenager's bedroom, kind of messy, kind of not terrible, but certainly I would want it cleaned up. I said, okay, and why didn't you want to do this? He says, well, I was in the middle of playing video games. I said, all right. And I said, well, what's mom like when she comes home? He says, well, today she was angry. I said, well, about the room? And he says, yes. And I said, well, what does mom, prior to today, what does mom come home and what does she like? He says, well, she's tired. He says, because she gets home in the evenings, makes lunches, has a late dinner, goes to bed, wakes up, work again, works into the evening. I said, okay, so you can see mom's physically tired. He says, yeah, she comes home, she looks worn out. I said, and do you think mom wants to hear you say, no, I don't want to clean my room? He says, well, no, she doesn't want to hear that. I said, does your mom ask you often to clean your bedroom? Yeah, and sometimes I do, but today I was just in the middle of video games. I said, well, you can see that mom is worn down. I said, I think she would like your respect that you see what she does. There's an apartment, there's food on the counters, there's, you have a bed, you have clothes, you actually have a room to make messy because you have stuff in it. I said, and I think those are, thanks to your mom. So maybe understanding her long day and her being exhausted, show her a little respect and just say, yep, clean it. I'll do it. So that's where I like to help out in those situations. And it doesn't always have to be parent or child. That's just the example for today. Sometimes it's that type of argument between husband and wife, or even roommates, just two roommates who live together that they're not romantic in any way. They're not related in any way. Just two people that are sharing the rent can have this disagreement. And, figuring where to meet in the middle is what I like to try to help with. Lately, law enforcement trainings have started to change. I mean, we still have tactics and safety and things, but regarding communication, I'm seeing that they're starting to change a little bit in the way that law enforcement helps relationships, or law enforcement helps with families. And it's bringing in this idea of emotional intelligence. And it's been very interesting to me. And I encountered it at some supervisory trainings, as well as I went to a training so that I can train new officers here in the city. And it's about, the core of it is that we understand our emotions. We know how they affect us. We know how they get portrayed to others, and how we can read other people and understand their emotions. To me, it's just been a very fascinating way to look at it in regards to law enforcement. Were these shared in their packet? Okay, so I included a document here, a short 3-page article about emotional intelligence, and it's one that I think breaks it down rather easily, and it makes a great deal of sense. And I'll highlight a few points of it. Is that emotional intelligence is a kind of an intangible something that we all have, and we all have it to different degrees. It affects how we manage our own behavior, as well as navigate social complexities and make personal decisions to achieve hopefully positive results. Emotional intelligence is broken up into 4 parts: self-awareness, which is how we accurately perceive our own emotions, and self-management is how aware are we of our emotions, and how do they help us stay flexible and positive. And the third aspect is called social awareness, where you can accurately pick up on the emotions of other people. That's the one I like to call where we read the room. If we walk into a room and we can feel that, so to say, that attention that's involved with the people that are already in the room, that would be social awareness, is picking up on others' emotions. And lastly, the relationship management is the ability to use our awareness, the ability to use our idea and our thoughts of other people's emotions, and then how to use those to manage the interactions with those people. Like if I'm walking into a room and I feel that it's tension filled and there's 2 people kind of scowling at each other, probably not best to come in and just give them the big how do you do's and how's everybody going. All you're going to get is silence from everybody in the room, because you're not understanding the emotions that they're all going through. And I've begun to use these ideas and thinkings in my interactions with with people who are having arguments or disagreements, or something is going on in their relationships, and it's made a considerable difference. A big part of this would be, in addition to understanding your own emotions and the emotions of others, would just be better communication skills, in the fact of more listening, less talking. It's very hard to understand what somebody means when I myself don't stop talking because I'm trying to get my point across. And then on page 2 here is just the article notes 33 other important skills that emotional intelligence can make stronger for yourself. And I highlighted a few of them on my note here just because I think they're the few that can help with relationships and help make positive relationships, such as communication skills, social skills, empathy, stress tolerance, anger management, and flexibility. I think those are some of the big ones that can help make for healthy, stronger relationships.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
So my name is Carmen Garces, and I work at New Beginnings, a counselor. New Beginnings, we work with victims of violent crimes. I sit often with victims of domestic violence. So we just heard Officer Dan talk about the social awareness, right? How he probably gets called in, walks into a room, and very quickly he needs to scan what's happening, who's sitting where, who's doing what. And for you, it's probably a matter of safety as well. How safe is the place that I'm walking into, right? So what's happening there? He's picking up all these cues from the people in the room because we cannot not communicate, right? We are communicating. When you walk into that room, these people are communicating with you. They're telling you if it's safe. That woman sitting on the couch crying is communicating to you that she's upset, she's sad. The young man slamming the doors is communicating that he doesn't want to pick up the room. He'd rather finish his game, right? So we're constantly sending out messages all the time. Even when you sit there with a poker face, you're probably communicating, back off, I don't want to engage, whatever it is, but people do pick up on that. So having said that, we're communicating all the time. What does good communication look like in a healthy relationship, right? Officer Dan said, be a good listener, but what does that mean? And being a good listener probably means being present, not thinking about, I know exactly what I'm going to answer to that. That's not being a good listener. That's not being present, right? Being a good listener is not, well, boy, that sounds really dumb, what she's saying. Being judgmental when you're hearing what that other person is telling you is not good listening skills. Listening is not that easy. We hear things, but do we really, are we really present? Are we really taking in the body language, the feeling, the tone, all of that that's coming in, so that we can understand, right, what that person is trying to convey, what message they have for you. Being a good listener can start by just looking at the person on the face, in the eyes. There are some cultures that looking at a person in their eyes is pretty aggressive, so we don't. But in the culture here, looking at somebody in the eye when you're talking is good manners. If you cannot do that, look at the tip of the ear. They'll never know you're looking at their ear and not at their eyes. It just looks like you're looking at their eyes, okay? Leaning forward. sometimes just having your hands on the table unconsciously is kind of, all right, I know you don't have a weapon. I'm safe here. All right. So being a good listener, expressing ourselves clearly and concisely. With the emotional intelligence, know what your needs are so that you can express that. When I hear, oh, I want him to love me more. So I ask, what would that look like? What exactly would give you the sense that he's loving you more? Well, I think that he should bring me fresh flowers and chocolates. Now we're talking. Now that's something that your partner can grasp and say, that's easy. You know, I can get some flowers from the neighbor's backyard. No, don't do that. I can stop at the gasoline station and buy a packet of M&Ms, and I know you'll feel loved, right? But it's being able, don't assume that the other person knows what we need or we want. Well, we need to know that ourselves first, right? What is it that I need and I want? And then express it. Express it as clearly and as precisely as you can. Being friendly, right? The tone is important. Pay attention to the words that you use. Listen to the difference between, I have a request. Please put your dirty socks in the hamper. It hopefully sounds better than, I'm sick and tired of picking up your dirty socks, right? Chances are is that those socks and then other stuff is going to be on the floor for a long time, right? Saying it would be very helpful if you took the kids to the park on Saturday mornings, because then I can clean the kitchen, do all these. But ask if you need help, ask for it in a friendly way. I have a request. Could you please? It would be helpful. I'm sick and tired, and how often have I told you usually does not work, right? Being confident. How often I have heard, well, I have something to tell you, but if I do, I think you're going to be mad. Now you're really going to have to tell me, right? Just go ahead and say it. Go ahead and say, we need to sit down and talk about our finances. When would that be a good time for you? Who wants to talk about finances? It's a difficult topic, but it has to be discussed. In every relationship, you need to talk about, can we afford that new car or can't we? Right? We need to talk about this. That's from Love and Logic. That when would that be convenient for you?
Can you explain Love and Logic a little bit?
All right. So Love and Logic is going to be offered here. Is it here? At the middle school in October. And it is a system, it's a way of communicating with children of all ages and adults. But it's, now you put me on the spot, because it's in a way that it's engaging. It's in a way that it's cooperative. I don't tell you what to do. We figure out together a way to solve this problem. And so when you have some stake in the game, you're more willing to participate and find a solution. So have empathy. Try to understand where that other person is coming from, right? And that's what you ask that young man. Do you think your mom wants to hear, no, I don't want to pick up my room? And that's what you were asking, right? She's tired. You're looking for that empathy. What does she look like when she comes home? Right? She's tired. she's tired. She has to cook, and then she has to clean, and then she opens your door, and So try to put yourself in that other person's shoes so that you can kind of meet them halfway, so that you can at least understand, yeah, that is annoying, or that is upsetting, or that is scary. Be open-minded. Be willing to meet that other person halfway. Accept another person's idea. If they say, if you say, it would be very helpful if you took the children out to the park on Saturday mornings. Oh no, they won't want to go because they'll want to stay and play their video games. Yeah, but how about if you really try it and say, and make it nice for them? Guess what, kids? On Saturday, we're going to do something special. I mean, sell it to them, but don't poo-poo somebody else's idea as, I don't think that's going to work. If you have a better suggestion, sure, bring it up. Tweak it so it works for you, but be willing to kind of accept those ideas, those suggestions. Go ahead and give it a try. What I have found out that makes poor relationships is really the lack of respect. Okay. Unhealthy relationships invariably will have that lack of respect. So I tell my clients, be intentional. Well, what does that mean? It means take a deep breath and think about, I'm about to give him the what for, and I'm about to use really colorful language, okay? So take that deep breath and ask yourself, what do I want to achieve with this? And then think, is the way that I'm going to say it, I said, going to make me achieve my goal, right? I just want him to hurt as much as I do. I understand that. But if the reason why you want to say that is to hurt somebody else, guess what? He's going to have a better one coming back. And you have not solved the problem. What you've created is even more pain, but it's not going to go away, right? Words are like arrows. Once they're out, you cannot unhear them. So be really, really mindful of what you want to achieve. Why do you want to insult somebody? If it is for them to understand that pain, chances are that they're going to be more focused on their own pain than on yours. So you missed the mark. It's not going to happen, right? So boundaries, healthy boundaries are so important too. Is our way of telling other people what's okay for us and what's not okay for us. And they can be boundaries. Setting boundaries is not pounding on the table and say, you will not do that with me. Boom. No. You can engage in dialogue. You can talk about what are the things that make you happy or make you upset or really, really are definitely, we're not even going there, right? And for that other person to listen and to respect that and to understand. The example of the socks on the floor is it's not as bad as some of the other things that happen in real abusive relationships. But being able to say, no, this is the line and we cannot cross it. Because when that happens, Officer Dan comes. And then we have another problem, right? So respect, we have to earn it. We give it also to our partners or to the person we are co-workers or whoever it is we are engaging with. If we start a conversation with that basis of respect, I'm here to tell you how I feel, and I want to hear, really listen how you feel, and come to a solution to whatever issue there is. So I would strongly recommend, if you're having problems in your relationship, not the problems that will require Officer Dan to come, that's already a step far from this. John Gottman is a couples therapist, and he wrote the 7 principles for making marriage work. And it's pretty neat. He's been studying couples for, I don't know, probably 30 years. And he's able to tell within, what is it, not even 5 minutes, if a couple will survive or not from observing. And from all the couples that he has taped and all the research that he has done, he came up with what he calls the 4 horsemen. And these are things to watch out in relationships. One is contempt. That is a real killer. Contempt is lack of respect, right? Contempt is treating somebody as if they were less than you are, not worthy, that, oh, you're so dumb. It is contempt. No, you're not dumb. And nobody should ever, ever tell you those words, right? So that's a red flag. If you're dating and your date says something that comes across as, I don't value you as a human being, run for the hills, because it's not going to get better, right? Criticism, you always and you never, that stops all kinds of communication, right? Criticism, you're lazy, you don't do anything, you don't listen, and then the ears close. There are better ways. Just don't criticize. Don't criticize. Defensiveness. I hear that a lot from my clients. Well, he tells me I make him do that. It's not taking responsibility for what you've done wrong. It's because I'm tired. It's because you don't listen. It's because a whole bunch of other things, except it's because I lost my cool. I don't have the patience, and I need to talk to somebody about how to communicate better, right? You hear defensiveness. Don't bother to continue with that conversation, because it's not going to happen. Just better to say, we'll pick it up later. We need to stop now. But then do come back and finish that conversation later. That's the rule, right? Giving each other that space, but finishing that conversation. And the last one is the stonewalling. And we all know what that looks like, I hope. And you know that person has blocked, we can't reach them anymore. There is no conversation there anymore. There is no communication there anymore. That person is gone, right? You can try again later, but without the criticism, without the contempt, and without the defensiveness. So back to, it's important, really important, that we approach the people we want to communicate with respect, with respect. And then a whole bunch of the things that I mentioned here will come naturally. It will flow. It will come along. And at the end of the day, what do you want to do? You just want to solve a problem, or just exchange ideas, get to know that person better. That is why we want to communicate with others, right? So on that note, I am going to pass this to Hailey.
Thank you, Carmen. Thank you, Santa, for inviting me here. Like Santa and Carmen said, my name is Hailey, and I work at New Day Women's Clinic in Delavan. We are a free pregnancy center. So we do ultrasounds and pregnancy tests, but we also do like parenting education for our moms and our dads. We have a baby boutique that they can get baby items for free through taking the classes. It's kind of an earn while you learn program. And then we do STD and STI testing. So we see a lot of different members of the community and coming from all over the place. So we don't have a residency restriction. So, I mean, we can see people from Milwaukee and Madison, and we do. We've had people come up from Illinois too. So we get a lot of exposure to different problems that people may have or anxieties or things that they're struggling with. So part of my role at the clinic is training our volunteers. And that looks a lot like kind of what we're doing here today. Much of the training that we do with them is teaching them effective communication, because they need to be able to be good listeners, because they're going to be advocates for our moms and dads that come in. They have to be able to sit in a conversation and read the room, like both Dan and Carmen said, and find out, is this a hear it problem? Is this a fix it problem? And we have to differentiate between those two, because hearing is going to require a lot more of your listening skills. And then you can move on to trying to come up with a solution. If it is a fix it problem that needs to be addressed right now, we get community resources involved. Our case manager does an assessment right away, and we try to plug them in where those gaps are in their everyday life that they need help. So I also want to mention that I am certified to teach real essentials, relationship education. And so part of that training that I went through to do that, they talk about a book called Fight for Your Marriage. And the authors came up with danger signs for communication, which I find interesting, because there are a lot of what Carmen was talking about with the 4 horsemen in the book that she mentioned. So like escalation, if you sense that this conversation is not being productive and you're being upset, they talk about practicing a timeout. So when you play sports, why do coaches call timeouts? They call them to give the players a chance to breathe, maybe to change it up, give them a word of encouragement to let them know, like, you know, something bad just happened, but it's not the end of the world. We're going to keep moving. And that same idea works in your conversations. So yelling back and forth, as we all know, isn't going to get anywhere. So from there, they kind of move on to explaining there's 2 roles in a conversation. You're either the speaker or you're the listener. And if you are approached about a conversation, that automatically puts you in the listener role. As a listener, it is your job to paraphrase and rephrase what you hear the speaker saying in order to make sure that you're understanding them properly. So this is something that we use a lot in our clinic setting. When we are doing our assessments with the moms and dads we work with, we want our volunteers to rephrase to them, this is what I hear you saying, and then in their own words, kind of say it back to them to make sure that we're getting all of the emotion, we're getting all of the roots behind everything that they're talking about. Because a lot of times, or most times, the emotions that you're seeing and hearing in their voice are not actually the problem. There's going to be a root cause that has produced those emotions. So we're trying to address that, because addressing that is going to get us the best results in the end. So that's a really good technique to use. Just take a break, pause, especially if you're the listener and you sense that escalation happening. Just take a breather. And like Carmen said, come back to the conversation. You don't have to figure it out right then and there. It's actually better that you separate hashing out what the problem is and then solving it in kind of 2 separate but connected conversations. So not days apart, an hour, 30 minutes, you need to know what is important in your relationship. Some individuals need to hear that this is a problem first, take a step back and to think about it, because they need to be able to process, all right, what's my response going to be? And then you can address how are we going to solve this together as a united front. And that doesn't just go for romantic relationships. That goes for friendships, parenting, teachers. There's wisdom in knowing that you don't always have to have an answer right away. And knowing that listening is going to get you the most information than trying to come up with your response. Something else that I wanted to mention is an activity that we are taught that we teach when we teach this curriculum to my students. Carmen had mentioned your words and how powerful they are. So one of the things that we do with our students is we have them break into groups and write out like a texting conversation. So we give them a prompt and they go on a poster board and they write out a texting conversation between two individuals that are friends or classmates or brother and sister or whatever the prompt they're given is. And that's all they're told to do. And then when they're all done, they get up in front of the class and they read the text, role play essentially. So one person will read one side of the text, the other person will read the replies. And the idea of the activity is to allow them to hear out loud what they would normally say through a phone that is maybe going to be more hurtful than if you're in person. So we actually many times will like start laughing at how little childish it sounds to read it out loud, or how hurtful it is truly, because would you ever say that to somebody's face? So taking a second to think about, what am I about to say and how is that going to translate to who I'm speaking to? This is especially important when you consider the age of your audience and who you're talking to. If this is a 5-year-old, use language that the 5-year-old understands, and understand that they're not always able to separate emotion from the problem. They see mom or dad is upset, maybe getting frustrated, but unless you actually tell them what you're frustrated with in a constructive manner that they can solve the problem in their head, they're just going to hear your emotion. And they're not going to know how to prevent that from happening in the future. So we do that activity with our students to kind of get them to take a second to think about, like, in their day-to-day interactions when they're not face-to-face with someone, what words are they choosing? And then would they choose those same words when they're actually talking to somebody? Because you don't have body language when you're on social media or when you're texting. So you're not going to get those cues that, like, hey, something is not sitting right here. And that is where things like social media and just the access to technology can be a damaging thing, but it also can be a very good thing. So it's knowing that balance of what's healthy and what's not. Let's see. I think, yeah. Oh, one last thing that I wanted to say. Part of the curriculum I teach also, before we get into what a healthy relationship looks like, we teach the students about themselves. They go through a series of activities to kind of learn about who they are as a person, where does their inherent worth come from, so that it's not determined by external factors. And then we tell them healthy people ask for what they need, or healthy people verbalize what they need. And Carmen mentioned that you need to know what you need. So if there is unsaid things that you're struggling with and you're getting frustrated at other people for not meeting those, they can't meet them if they don't know what they are. So the first thing you should always assess is, what do I need in this scenario? And then how can I verbalize that to the person that I'm having an issue with? So with that, I will hand it over to Kim.
Thank you. My name is Kim, and I work at the Agape House in Walworth. We serve teens that come from hard places alongside their families in a whole child program. So our students come to us from all sorts of backgrounds, but what brings them to us is the behaviors that they're sharing with the community, with their families, become so loud and unmanageable that the families are at a place of crisis. What do we do? How do we help this kiddo? A lot of times, as Carmen was sharing earlier, those behaviors are a form of communication first and foremost. They're telling us a story that the student and or family doesn't know how to put words to yet, so they use behaviors to do that. And as Hailey was sharing, this is great at the end. They've already said everything, so I just get to re-encourage it. But as Hailey was sharing, there's a whole dynamic to it. There's a root to it, and there's a lie or a belief system that somewhere along the way they believed about themselves or others around them, and as a result of not reconciling that lie, they pacify it with choices to salve that space. So what I do is I work with the kiddos and I also work with the parents. And truly, I believe we were created for relationship. I believe we're created to belong and we're created to be in unity. And so everything that comes around us enforces that belonging, enforces that need for relationship. And of course, none of us do it well. So that is always under attack and that is always under construction, if you will. And so our families have learned what they've learned, and some of those things are good things, and some of those things are not so helpful things, but that's what they know. And so that's what they continue to teach. One of the things that we really try to encourage our families to do is to halt. And that's an acronym we use, and it's hungry or hydrated, angry, lonely, or tired. And if we could take some time to halt, we will see that our physical and our needs, our physical needs encompassing our emotional needs, need to be cared for before we can care for those around us. And as Hailey was sharing, the first and most important relationship that needs tending is always yourself. And you need to understand your own identity and who you are and what your needs are, including taking an assessment of where am I, what are the lies I'm believing, and why am I responding in the sense of a lie versus in the sense of truth. So oftentimes, like Sir Dan was sharing earlier, mom comes home, she's one of those words, she's tired, and probably that little boy was lonely. And so you have these two things mixed together, and they're responding or reacting out of this place of need instead of understanding how to communicate their needs. When mom comes home and suggests that she's tired by shouting, "Can't you just clean your room?" And he suggests he's lonely by saying, "I'm in my video games," neither one of them are in a place where they're communicating each other's needs very well, and they are clashing. If mom took that step back and suggested, "I'm really tired and the next thing out of my mouth is not going to be helpful," could she have done it better? Could she have waited for another day? Or was her response that of reaction instead of, responding? So, again, that identity in ourselves, being in tune with ourselves. What do we need in that moment? And when you are in a situation where you walk into a room and you have chaos or dysregulation around you, how are you regulating yourself? How are you asking yourself and assessing what your needs are? Are you in a place where you are angry or lonely? Angry is a secondary emotion. So what is the real emotion underneath that? And are you addressing that in an honest way, or are you reacting because it's easier to do? So taking that time to step back and know yourself well outside of those moments of dysregulation helps you to understand how to respond in those moments of dysregulation. So you can have a kiddo that comes at you at full force. They've had a terrible day at school. You're the mom. You're the one who's responsible to be the regulator in the household, but you're also tired. And they come at you full force. You go back at them full force. Nobody wins. Nobody is edified. Nobody is lifted up in that moment. Both of you are defeated. If you're seeing that kid for what they need, they're slamming at you and screaming at you because X, Y, and Z happen. Taking yourself out of that moment emotionally to hear what their emotions are actually telling us. Well, maybe they had a really bad day at school because somebody said some really hurtful words to them and they don't know how to tell you that. So this is how they're telling you that. Are you okay with yourself enough to be able to hear those words and to hear what's not being said and to hear what's underneath that? An example of a kiddo just, just coming at you full force and stopping and pausing your own emotions, knowing that it's not about you in that moment. It's really about that person, and hearing what the need is, not what the words say, not what the behavior looks like, but what is the need in that moment? Do they need to just get this out? Do they need to feel encouraged? Do they need to know that whatever was said to them was not truth and that they're believing something that was not truth? And how do we meet them in that place to really lift them up and encourage them when we ourselves are feeling defeated? Do we have the emotional capacity to regulate ourselves in any relationship? And again, like they're sharing, it's not parenting, it's not, it could be your next door neighbor. Just an example, of a dog barking and it's obnoxious, and the next door neighbor comes to your house and they're just blaring at you because your dog is barking incessantly and they're just really giving it to you. Are you so emotionally attached to the dog that you can't hear that was really annoying, that you can't hear that they were trying to get some sleep, that they were just worked a 12-hour shift? What is it that you are attached to that disconnects you from hearing what the greater need is? Are you able to disconnect your own emotion from somebody coming at you to really truly hear what they need in that moment? Do they need to be validated? Yeah, you're right. That dog barking is obnoxious. I agree. What can I do? How can I help you? I think the most important thing to do in listening, as Hailey was sharing, was that active listening where you are sharing back what you're hearing, but then following that up with, what do you need from me? How can I help you in this? Or asking other questions like, can you help me understand why you see it that way? A lot of times we feel misunderstood. All the time, actually. I feel misunderstood personally. But does somebody stop to ask for understanding? And how do I teach them to do that? I model that. I have to start with that. I have to know that what I need to do is understand the situation better so I can reconcile it, so my emotions can be regulated. So, can you help me understand why you are needing video games now more than you're needing to clean your room? Or can you tell me how much longer you need on those video games? Can I come back in 5 minutes and we can talk about it then? Questions are so much more helpful than giving directions. Like, how much longer do you need on that before we can talk about this? Or how much longer do you need on that before you start to clean your room? Or what can I do to help my dog not bark incessantly? Do you have any ideas? Inviting people into the solution, inviting them into the conversation, and inviting them into sharing what understanding looks like.
Awesome.
Are there any questions?
I'll quickly piggyback onto your let's come up with a solution together that you just spoke of, which my kids aren't watching, but I use that on them. Is I want to give I want something to happen. Put away your toys, put away your baseball helmet, clean your room, make your bed. And two ways I'll go about it is ask them to do it, but ask how much more time they need with what they're doing. 5 more minutes, 5 minutes. All right, at 3:40, it's time to pick up your baseball stuff, as well as involve them in the solution of give them a choice between two things that I want them to do. Ultimately, I want them to do two things. Which one do you choose to do first? I give them what they think is the authority to make their own decisions. He's 6, but he thinks he's making great choices, but I'm getting two things done at once. That's come a long way. I got to try to incorporate that a little bit more at work, but involving them in the solution is helpful. No matter who we're talking with, the neighbor with the barking dog, the neighbor with the dog that goes to the bathroom on my yard, or anything like that I deal with at work as well. If we can involve everyone in the solution, I think it's a great outcome for everyone.
I think ultimately, knowing yourself is really helpful, knowing your own love language, knowing your own personality, so you can also see other people's language, what they need to feel loved and heard and respected and valued, and how they speak is so important, because then you're looking for that instead of looking inward at what speaks to you. You're looking what speaks to them so you can communicate with them better. I think men and women are absolutely wired differently. Men need to feel respected, and empowering that respect level on any level is going to get you so much further. A woman is empowered with love and nurture. So again, how can we empower her in a loving and nurturing way? How can we empower him in a respectful way? And when you treat a woman with nurture and respect and admiration, she's going to go further. When you treat a man with respect and empowering him to walk in that respectful way, he's going to feel that and walk that out and carry that out well as well.
Kim, can you explain about love language?
Sure. So love language is just a way that people hear or feel or sense love. You had shared earlier, if he would only buy me flowers and chocolates, then I would know I was loved. Well, that person's love language then is a gift, and that's how that person feels that love is being expressed to that person. But if you bought me a gift, I would say, okay, it wouldn't matter to me. Mine would be more the time spent with me. My love language is time and words of affirmation. I need to hear that you see me. I need to hear that you notice me. I need to hear words. I talk a lot, so that probably goes hand in hand. But then also time. Spend that time with me. Hang out with me. Even if those times don't include words, we're together. We're doing something. We're actively together. So those are two different love languages. Acts of service is where somebody would maybe do something. I'm going to do the dishes for you. So every mom in the diaper decade is going to adore someone coming over and doing wash and doing dishes, because those acts of service are things that she's, not able to do right now. And that's where she's going to feel appreciated and nurtured and cared for well. So knowing your own love language, but then also knowing the love language of those around you. Because if I am going to go to Hailey's house and do her dishes, and her love language is quality time, and I'm over there doing the dishes and she's hanging out on the couch waiting for me to visit with her, she's not going to feel loved. She's not going to feel cared for. And that's not going to speak to her. She's going to feel neglected. She's going to feel the exact opposite of what my intention is. So knowing your own love language and knowing how to express that need appropriately, like, I really need time with you this week. When can we build that in? Or I could really use help with the wash and with the dishes. Is that something you could do for me? But then also knowing that of the people around you, what are their love language? Because again, if I'm going to communicate to Hailey by doing her dishes when she wants to hang out on the couch with me, she's not going to receive the love I'm trying to give her, because I'm perhaps giving her my love language instead of hers. And then it actually communicates the opposite.
If I could jump into that, if for those of you who haven't heard about it, it's called the 5 love languages. If you do a simple Google search of 5 love languages, there's a quiz you can take, and you can find out for yourself what your love language is. But also you can, they have a format where you can say that you're a parent answering for your child, and then you can learn what your child's love language is also, or you could simply just verbally ask them the questions and then they can answer them and you fill it out that way. But the same creators of that created a resolution language quiz. So essentially it is, when you're in a conflict with somebody, what do you need to feel like it's resolved? And I don't remember all of them because it's their more newer one. But one of them is like simply, I just need to hear you say that you're sorry and that you'll try not to do it again. Another one is, I need you to like give me a hug and tell me that you love me. And they go through 5 of those so that okay, when my child is upset, what do they need? Or when mom's upset, what does she need from me to feel like we can move on from where we just were? So utilize that for sure. It's free.
And when you learn those things about yourself, again, the most important relationship truly is first and foremost with yourself, so you can be able to communicate that with others. What I need from you is, I need to know that when you are sorry, that we reconcile with a hug at the end, because that's what I need to know that this is resolved. But if that person doesn't know that, that need is going to go unmet, and then the relationship builds tension and bitterness.
I do have a quick question regarding anybody on the panel. You shared great insight and great skill set for young folks, young teenagers to young adults. What would you say to youth, like a 5-year-old, for them to understand their emotions, or where to go to help them, or ask certain questions so they can identify where they're at as their brain is developing to help the relationship between child and parent?
I'll jump in on that. So what we do with our youth is we really try to teach them truth. So when they hear something, they go to that untrue belief system, and empowering them to ask themselves in that moment, is what I just heard true? Or is what I'm telling myself true about myself or about those around me? Is this true in this moment? If it's not true, what is true? And to be able to see it, ask it, and reconcile it in those moments. Because otherwise the belief system continues to snowball in a negative way if they don't stop and assess, is this true? Feelings are very fickle. They're not permanent. They're temporary, but they feel very big. And in those big moments, how do you assess if it's true? Do you need a break? Do you need to halt? Do you need to make sure you're not, so hungry you can't think straight, or so angry you can't think straight, or so lonely that you believe whatever is being said around you, or so tired that you don't have a clear vision? Like, do you need to take a break from all of that and come back and speak truth over that in a later moment? So yeah, feelings are very big, but they're temporary, they're very fickle, and they're not always honest.
One of the trainings I had been to for law enforcement, the instructor was very, very big on emotional intelligence, and was trying to teach that to his child at home, and just dealing with emotions and recognizing emotions. And I think at the time his child was 3, and he just made flashcards of character faces with anger, sad, happy, and everything in between. And just a couple times a week would flip them with his child to recognize what these mean, and then recognize what these mean with people. And then he had evolved it to, he would mix up the faces and then pull one up, and the child would say sad. And then the instructor, or my instructor, who was dad, would ask, well, what does sad feel like for you? And then the child would have to try to verbalize, what does sad make me feel like? Or what do I feel like when I am sad? It's just a kind of, and of course he played it off as a game with the child, but certainly had some very important lessons to it.
I love that, because I agree 100% that we need to recognize our feelings and emotions. Yeah, they're not permanent, but I am surprised time and again at how many people sit in my office and they don't know how to recognize some of the basic emotions. I feel blah. What is that? Right? And their marriage has just ended. Officer Dan was there. Now they have, lawyers and all that. Can part of that be grief? And you have no idea. All of a sudden it's like, grief. Yeah, my marriage just ended, and it ended really badly. And my dreams for that future, for that relationship, are dead. And yeah, I have a right to feel grief. But take it, and I honestly believe that you cannot be too young to start learning about how that sadness feels, how frustration, how loneliness, how all the array of emotions, and the little faces, the cue cards. That's huge, that the kids can just point at it and say, this is how I feel. Think about kids that make the drawings too, and they paint the sun and a smiley, right? They have that sense. It's not like they don't know. It's just giving them the words so that they can match those feelings to that word. So I love what your trainer is doing. I think it's fantastic.
Yes, Mary Ellen.
I feel like I'm hearing a reoccurring theme about all of these in terms of relationships with others. And that is that our relationship with ourselves is kind of the base and the foundation. And if that relationship with ourselves, in terms of feeling good about that, healthy about that, managing that with ourselves, is not in good place, it's going to be very, very difficult to have good, healthy, positive relations ongoing with others. if any of you want to comment about that or see, how have you seen that? I appreciate that.
I'll say I've noticed. I think that is so important. You mentioned, Kim mentioned, the most important relationship that we can have is the one with ourselves, right? But think about how often we get the messages of, you're being selfish. If you think about yourself, you need to think about everybody else first, right? Everybody else, because God forbid you think about yourself, that is selfish. We're starting to get away from that idea, and we're starting to hear more about the oxygen mask. Put it on first before you can be there for somebody else. But I think that there's still a lot of that. Oh, my kids need me. Is it going to be bad if I take a few hours to go and sit with a friend and talk, right? Our boss is very big about self-care because we need it and we need to accept it. And a lot of us are uncomfortable with that idea of, oh, no, my God, no, I have to book the entire day with clients because there's a crisis. No, there will be a crisis if I don't take the time out, right? And it's moving away from that. We're not being selfish. We need to take care of ourselves there so that we can be present for others.
Go ahead.
Do you think that you might do one of those forums like that for self-care?
Yeah. An audience member asked if we would do an in-conversation event regarding self-care. And yes, we can definitely do that. I think part of that is the mindfulness. And we do have an event going on regarding mindfulness coming up within the next school year. I also like the point that Carmen makes about self-care, and what Mary Ellen says is to work on ourselves, because I think I can speak and attest for myself as an adult. Sometimes I'm wondering what is masking my emotions and understanding where I'm at. So people that are online, we put resources in the chat, and one of the resources is the zone. And the Elkhorn Area School District, elementary, middle school, and I even believe high school, talks about this zone meter and is teaching the kids where they may be at, what color, where they're at. If they're overwhelmed, it's somewhat yellow. If they're angry, it's somewhat red. And it's a common language. And I think another thing that we're learning here tonight is that there's common language, self-care, mindfulness, love and logic, or love language. These are words that we're using, but not everybody understands them. And I think it's vital that we all are on a united front in that, or an understanding, as if building these relationships, they know what they're doing or why that they're doing it, rather than, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. It's, again, understanding your emotions and your moods and where you are coming from. And as an adult, I'm still doing that.
I just want to speak into that self-care. A lot of people do feel like, that's a spa day and pedicures and manicures and, going to the movie and shopping with some retail therapy. And all those things can be a part of self-care. But I think that's the glorified form of self-care. Sometimes self-care is just doing a check on your emotions. I have been in a place in my life where I've set a timer on my phone, and it would go off at certain times of the day and just ask me to take an honest assessment of, how am I feeling right now? Am I feeling overwhelmed? Am I feeling sad? Am I hungry? Have I not eaten yet? Like, just honoring where I'm at the moment, so I can be honest with it and either deal with it, or at least be honest with it and go about the next part of my day. Self-care is not fluffy. It's not all of those fluffy things. It can, but in a general moment, it's really not. And one thing we do teach our kiddos is there's a difference between being nice and being kind. Being nice is doing something because it's self-serving. If I am nice to you, it's because it's good for me. If I'm being kind, it's because I'm genuinely looking out for somebody else's best interest. and I'm genuinely doing it from a heart of servanthood. With that being said, we need to be kind to ourselves, not nice to ourselves. We need to be kind to ourselves. We need to do things on purpose for ourselves. That includes the things that go between our ears, our head, and the things that we say to ourselves, and taking that time in those spaces in our day to acknowledge, I'm really angry right now. And I can't figure that out why, but I know I'm angry. Okay, now I've said it. I don't understand it, but I'm acknowledging it and not letting it take over this moment. But I have to come back to that later. So maybe I'll set a time where I'm going to come back and journal about, I'm really feeling angry right now, and just let that flow out. And maybe the truth comes out of that. But being in a place of self-care is not selfish. It's self-serving. It's serving those around you by making sure you're in a healthy place. Because if you're no good for you, you're no good for anybody.
Is there any other questions? Yes. No, that's okay. I'm just going to repeat what you asked too.
So I don't know how to ask this, I guess. Here you go. So what are some things for teaching about self-care, or to break the guilt circle, or
So your question is, what are some skill set to teach youth about self-care?
so they don't have to feel
Guilty about it?
guilty about
So the question is, what skill set or what technique can youth learn to not feel guilty about saying no or changing a situation with another?
I can speak a little bit about that. I think when, especially when kids are little, I think they need to be taught how to do that. So I think every parent needs to start by one, modeling it for their kids. Kim kind of talked about that. Being able to do that and have their kids see that they're doing that in their life. But also then I would really just ask the kid, like if they're facing, say it's a decision to go have a play date with another kid. Do you want to go to so-and-so's house? And kind of read their response. If it feels like they're just saying that to please somebody, like dive into that. But start by asking them questions like that as they get older, and then they'll be able to do that for themselves, I think, naturally, because I think naturally we pick up on our surroundings, and then it just kind of comes a part of our day. So a really good thing to practice, I think, is just to ask them questions that talk about self-care in order to establish some of those habits from a young age. And even that can look like asking them, well, what do you like to do for fun? And then, so they say, well, I like to play at the park. Then the next time they are upset or frustrated about something, say, you once told me that you like playing at the park and that's fun for you. So let's go play at the park to ease some of your frustration right now. And then that is teaching them, maybe not in the exact words, but playing at the park can help when they're frustrated. And then when they're older, they're going to come up with their own way or their own habit to ease some of that frustration. It's probably not going to be playing at the park anymore at like 32 years old, but it will be something else. And what you're using to teach them that, it will translate over as they grow up, I think.
I will reiterate what Carmen said too. It's confidence. So if we start teaching our youth confidence at a young age in their decisions by supporting in what they say and choose that are healthy choices, that will build their confidence so they can rest assured as they make their decision with their peers standing next to them that it's a strong decision, that they probably won't be bullied or be threatened about the choices that they make.
And then going back to that, conversations. So when they come home and they don't feel cared for by their peers or by their teachers or by you even, asking like, what did you need in that moment? This is what happened, but what did you need that you didn't get? Or what could have looked different? or why do you think you went along with that even though you knew you weren't comfortable with it, and just helping them to process it, because sometimes they make the decision and they don't understand the process behind the decision, and they don't stop to think of, well, I didn't want to be alone, so I went with them because I was afraid to be alone. So, okay, next time that happens and you're feeling like you'll be alone or rejected if you don't go, what can you do instead? What can you do next time? And helping them discover a plan or other solutions, so that when that fear of loneliness might arise because of the rejection, which is oftentimes in our youth, they're feeling like they'll be rejected or not belonging as a part of a group. When that feeling comes, because it comes in all of us, what would you do next time that would help not feel alone, but also not engage in the thing that you didn't want to do to begin with?
Did I understand correctly? You were saying that it was a youth that doesn't want to do something, but they don't know how to say no?
Just to try to break that, because we all, like you said, oh, don't think about yourself, you gotta think of others. So I'm trying to break that circle.
Okay. So
They can maybe have those stressors every year, and they know themselves and they don't put themselves in that situation.
mhm. And I think boundaries, healthy boundaries are really important, and teaching your child that they have a right to say no, right? That we have a right to say, no, I I prefer to stay home today. Thank you for the invitation, but I'm going to be baking muffins with my mother. I don't know. But to feel that they can say no and it's okay. Um, the other part there, which is different, is are they saying yes because they want to be liked and accepted? And that's a different that comes from that sense of wanting to belong that we all have, right? Nobody wants to be the outsider, especially at age 13, because you don't. So that is a tricky, and I think that is what your answer addressed. But teaching the kids those boundaries of saying you don't have to say yes to everything. You know, the same way we teach them to keep their bodies safe by saying only these people have a right to touch you. And if somebody else comes and does that, talk to a teacher, come to me, tell an adult, right? But teaching them that there are boundaries, how to stay safe, and that they have a right to say, I'm sorry, I'm going to stay home. I can't come to your party, or I can't come to your house, whatever.
Do we have any other questions? Any questions online? Okay, well, I want to thank you all for being here tonight. The Resiliency Coalition appreciates everybody's time, especially for the panelists, to talk about your expertise and your careers and sharing it with our community and building resilience. In that, I also would like to reiterate that on October 20th, we're going to have Healing from Domestic Violence conversation. So please tune in with us on that. If you have any questions or you would like any information, please reach out to me at the school district. We will put the information in the chat. This will be recorded and posted on a YouTube page as a resource as well. Otherwise, that is it for tonight. Have a great night. Be well, be healthy, be safe, and keep staying resilient. Thank you, folks.